Hello and welcome to the Global Dialogue. I'm Shereen Bhan, and joining me today on the program for a very special conversation is the CEO of British Airways, Sean Doyle. Also marking a very important milestone here in India, a century of flying in India. Sean, thanks very much for joining us and congratulations. 100's a big number.
It is a very big number, yeah. And of course, British Airways is flying about 105 years, but 100 of those have been serving India. Now, back then, it was 14 days to fly from London Airport to Delhi, and today, of course, is 8.5 hours. So we've come a long way, but we're very proud of our heritage and our presence in the Indian market.
Well, you know, you said you've come a long way, and I would imagine there's a long way to go. So let's talk about the future flight path as far as British Airways is concerned for India. You're operating, what, about 56-odd flights today a week?
Yeah, we are about 50 flights.
What could that number look like in 2025?
Well, in 25, we have plans to grow, and, you know, we have plans to expand here in Delhi. And we will be bigger than we would have been pre-pandemic. So as well as building out the network into India, we're also looking as well to build connections over Heathrow for Indian travellers who can go to maybe 31 cities in the US non-stop. Because as well as having the biggest network out of Europe to India, we have the biggest network out of London to the United States. So as well as serving the local market, we serve the connecting market very effectively.
So Sean, how important is India for British Airways today? And what's the aspiration, what's the ambition in terms of market share? Because it's still fairly small in comparison to the aspiration that you have.
Well, I think India is our second biggest market. It is strategically very important. We have a lot of links from a trade and a diaspora perspective. We think air service is a very critical catalyst for the growing economic relationship that's emerging between the two governments. But also we employ a lot of people in India. We have 2,500 people who work for British Airways here. And in fact, yesterday I had the privilege of opening up our new engagement centre down here in Noida. So we have a great team here. They're very much part of the British Airways family. And they make the experience in British Airways, you know, very, very, I think, comfortable and fit for purpose for the Indian market.
So, you know, you talked about this being your second largest market and a very strategic market for you. Now, what is that going to entail in terms of future investments, in terms of future hiring, and in terms of future expansion, you know, from a connectivity point of view?
You know, we're investing $7 billion in modernising British Airways, and that's well underway. You will see more and more of our new product on the Indian routes. Our Club Suite, which is an award-winning business class experience, is now on nearly every route, and by the time we get to the end of next year, nearly all of our flights will have that experience. We're also investing in new technology, so a fantastic digital experience, and of course we're modernising our IT infrastructure. But generally, you know, whether it's the digital experience or the onboard experience, we've very, very ambitious investment plans. And, you know, we're only starting in British Airways on this very extensive modernisation programme.
I'll talk to you about the modernisation programme in just a second, but let me labour a little bit more about the Indian market. And, you know, if you look at the IATA data as well as the IATA forecast, India is being positioned as one of the fastest growing commercial aviation markets in the world today. From that perspective, what's the kind of demand outlook that you foresee?
I think that's obvious. You know, even compared to China, I think Indian travel per capita is about 1/10 of what we see in China. So the growth is going to be exponential. I think everybody will want to serve the market. I think it's a very exciting time for international operations into India, but also for the domestic market. But I think India is a very important strategic market for anybody who's serious about international aviation.
So let's talk about that modernisation plan that you've announced now as far as British Airways is concerned. And now a large chunk of that, I would imagine, is going to go in as far as your fleet acquisition and fleet expansion is concerned. Take me through how you see that pipeline being built out over 2025 and beyond.
About 50% of our $7 billion is fleet. The remainder is modernisation of our IT estate, a better digital experience, new lounges and a better experience on board with things like reconfigured aircraft. Then we look beyond that. I think we do want to keep on expanding our long-haul network. We want to take more long-haul planes into British Airways, and we have order books that will fulfil that ambition. Of course, we have to look at the global supply chain and some of the challenges there that we do see. But right now, we're taking delivery of the aircraft when we need them, and we have an extensive order book, which will bring about over 35 new planes into British Airways over the next few years.
Okay, 35 over the next few years. You talked about the supply chain constraints, and you know, it's Boeing largely that's facing a lot of the heat at this point in time. Does that in any way reshape your plans? Does that in any way, you know, constrain your capacity guidance?
I think, you know, we're caught up in a global issue here. I think Boeing have a lot of challenges they need to navigate through. We have a long partnership with Boeing, and we work very closely to make sure that we can support them as they, you know, change their business model. I think at the end of the day, we should never lose sight of the fact that it's customers that we need to look after here. And when our planes don't come in time, ultimately it's our customers that get affected, and we should always bear that in mind. But I think, when it comes to engine manufacturers as well, we have challenges we need to navigate through. And I think the sooner we see the supply chain get back to the level it was pre-pandemic, the better for the industry.
That's only one of the issues that the aviation industry is dealing with at this point in time. Let's talk about some of the other big headwinds, and that has to do with geopolitical tensions, which are not in your control. And that is leading to airspace restrictions. It's leading to longer flight times. How are you dealing with that as an airline?
Yeah, I think we're very used to dealing with it. British Airways operates to 200 cities in about 80 countries, so we're used to having to navigate through changing circumstances. And I'm very proud of the way my people do that. And I think the industry is very good at dealing with these issues. But we do have, Russian airspace is closed. We've got limitations in European airspace at the minute that affect operations.
And
of
now
course,
with
the Middle East
Iran and
situation
Israel, yes.
Yes, but I think we're well able to cope with that. And to be honest, our flying programme has largely been unaffected by, whatever changes and restrictions come our way in terms of airspace.
So that's not so much of a problem as of today. Crude oil prices have also been largely benign. Of course, we've seen a degree of volatility on account of the escalation of tensions in the Middle East. How are you looking at that? And more importantly, your aspiration of moving to sustainable fuel, and you've got a flight path for that as well. How confident do you feel about that?
But I think we are always trying to get ahead of the curve when it comes to sustainability. We have a commitment to get to 10% sustainable aviation fuel by 2030. And as a group, International Airlines Group has secured about 30% of that supply. So I think we're leading in terms of our procurement of actually committed supply of SAF. We need policymakers to help us get more production built, whether that's plants being built in the UK and Europe, to match maybe the pace of development we see in the US. And I think that's going to be a challenge as we look beyond 2030. The oil price will be what it'll be. I think we try and hedge risk, but ultimately, you could spend a lot of time trying to figure out which direction it will go. All I think you got to do is, be flexible in the way you manage your business in the light of it.
Well, speaking of, how consumers are dealing with inflation, and to some extent, I guess they have adjusted to higher prices, but you're now starting to see interest rates move lower. In fact, we just had the ECB announce a rate cut earlier this evening. What does that tell you in terms of consumer demand, which has already been fairly resilient, but as you go into the holiday season, what's the expectation?
Well, I think, the good news about interest rates coming down and inflation falling is I think it will be good news for consumer spending. And we've been very encouraged by the strength of consumers over the last 2 years. And our indications are that will carry on. And I think it will get, hopefully, a little bit of a boost in confidence as we see interest rates fall, not just in Europe, but also potentially in the UK, as well as the cuts we see in the US.
What does that mean in terms of load factors, for instance? I mean, we're coming off some pretty, a pretty strong base. So what does 2024 at close look like, and what does 2025 look like?
2024 has been one of our busiest summers. And I think 2025, again, we see very, very similar patterns of demand emerging. Certainly there's nothing to see at the minute in terms of any changes in demand in 24 versus 25.
What do you think has propelled this kind of demand? I mean, we saw it post-pandemic, and it was, a lot of people call it revenge travel or what have you, with the need for people to just come out after having been shut down and locked down for a good part of 2 years. What are you attributing this demand increase to?
It's a great question, and I think ultimately travel fulfills a very important purpose. I think we really missed not being able to visit our loved ones. I think a lot of people missed not being able to take that trip they'd planned over the course of the pandemic. And I think it's something that is very, very important to the way we live our lives as human beings. And I think people missed it, and they love travelling again. And we're delighted that, that demand for travel is sustaining.
So, if I were to ask you if there are any structural changes or structural shifts that aid the growth of the aviation industry, is there anything in particular today that you believe has structurally changed the story for you and the airline?
Look, I think, one thing is, of course, we've been modernising our fleets, and, the industry has actually been taking delivery of new aircraft with better range, and we're able to fly to more places directly than ever before. I think number two, in India, for instance, I think airport infrastructure has been developed, which is a critical enabler, I think, of growth of the industry. But also the other thing which I find very encouraging is people are still drawn to work in aviation. I think we have recruited 16,000 new people into British Airways, and people are still fascinated by what we do, which is fulfill something which is very exciting for people every day.
16,000 hired. Do you believe that you may need to do more?
Well, hopefully as we grow, we will need more people. And, as soon as we get our planes delivered, we need more flight crew, more cabin crew. And actually, we'll need more people here in our operations in India, where we have 5 cabin crew bases as well that we support.
We are going to take a break here on the Global Dialogue and return to our conversation with the CEO of British Airways, Sean Doyle, on British Airways turning 100 in India. Welcome back. You're watching the Global Dialogue. We're in conversation with Sean Doyle on British Airways flight path for India. Let's talk about technology, because I know that your ambition is to make British Airways a technology travel company. So, you know, part of this 7 billion transformation plan that you've unveiled, a large chunk of that is also going towards IT as well as IT modernization. Now, how does that fit in from an India perspective? How significant is India in trying to power British Airways' IT ambition as well?
Well, I think we're investing 7 billion, and about 700 million of that investment is going into our IT estate. Now, about half of that 700 million is building a new .com experience and a new app, and we already have a lot of routes that are working under our new technology, and it's very exciting. The other half is about modernizing our operational systems, and we work with a number of technology providers such as Tata Consultancy Services, and have done for a number of years, to help us power that transformation. But also, I think what we're doing with our engagement centre strategy and the technology we're using there, we are showcasing that in our engagement centres here in Noida and also in Gurugram. So India is very much at the forefront of the things we trial and we experiment with.
Well, India's at the forefront of the things you're experimenting with on the tech side, the experiments on the AI side, and you know, from a BA perspective as well as the industry perspective, I mean, how important is AI today, and what role do you believe AI is likely to play for the aviation sector 5 years on?
I think what AI can do is speed up an awful lot of transactions, which will really help the customer experience. So if you ring an engagement centre agent maybe in a year's time, and you have a query maybe about a rebooking or a complex fare item, you know, AI might be able to serve up the solution to the agent much more quickly than we see today.
But you don't see it doing away with the agent yet?
I don't actually. I do think that when people pick up the phone to talk to a human being, they want a human interaction. What we want to do is empower that agent to fulfill customer needs as best as we can. And I see AI playing a very, very big role in giving people access to the answer and the data they need much more quickly than we see today. I also see it just allowing us to run better operations, whether that's simulating networks, whether it's simulating disruption, recovering quicker from things like weather events. I think machine learning and the speed of computing we can get our hands on today will make us run a better operation. But at the same time, you know, flying people around the world is a physical activity, and it will always involve a large number of human beings fulfilling, you know, that operational requirement for us.
How much of AI is in use already at BA today?
We've a number of use cases, but part of what we do by transforming our IT estate and structuring our data is we make it very ready for AI exploitation in the future. So I think one of the things you do need to exploit AI is strong foundations and have your data in the right place. The things we're doing with our digital platforms and the things we're doing with our operational systems, I think will get us into that state of readiness in the future, and then we'll begin to see us really tip the iceberg.
Is it helping you today in terms of utilization, and do you believe that it could help even further in terms of utilization, turning planes around, ensuring that planes stay up on in the sky as opposed to you know, being grounded for any particular reason?
We're already, you know, for instance, we have now electronic log capture of all of our engineering reports on a plane. So our engineers are able to get sight of issues on a plane even before it taxis into the engineering hangar, and we're able to create interventions to maintain fleet health a lot quicker than we would have done. So we're using machine learning in our engineering function, we're using it in our engagement centres, and we're using it in the way we plan and allocate our aircraft across our operation.
Do you have a number in terms of the cost that you've been able to take out on account of the deployment of AI so far?
Right now what we're focusing on is performance improvements, whether that's fleet health and technical reliability, the speed at which we answer calls, the amount of time it takes to respond to a query. So they're the kind of metrics we're looking at right now. We do, as a group, have a £100 million investment agenda in AI, and what we do is we look at what we call use cases that can be deployed not just in British Airways but also in our sister airlines that we work you know, very intensely on.
You know, 105 years of taking the world to Britain and Britain to the world, and 100 years of taking India to Britain and Britain to India. But if I were to ask you about innovation and disruption as far as the aviation business is concerned, from your lens, from a customer's point of view, what do you believe we should brace ourselves for? What should we be excited about?
I think what we want to have is really a digital experience that enables all the convenience you need by logging onto the British Airways app. And I think whether that's, understanding your loyalty position, using your Avios currency to redeem or earn flights, whether it's changing your flights, making new bookings, suggesting experiences you may want, we want to be the one-stop shop for British Airways customers. And we want to really make that a great relationship. So I think that's number one you will see airlines do. And they're building technologies to do it. And I like to think that we are right now
seamless sort of...
A seamless end-to-end convenient set of services and retail experiences. That's at the heart of where we're heading. And I think when we do that, we get much better insight into what our customer, really wants to experience and where they want to fly to. And as I said, we have plenty of headroom for expanding our network and flying to more places as well in the future.
Are there any regions in particular that you believe that you're currently under-servicing, that you want to prioritize, just given the growth and demand?
Well, I would like to see can we rebuild our Asian network again over time, because it is smaller than it was pre-pandemic. We do, of course, have some reasons as to why it's smaller, restrictions on maybe how we can fly into places like China. But over time, we'd like to rebuild that North Asian network. India is a very important market. We'd look at the depth of the places we fly to today. Can we add frequency, but also potentially new destinations? And also rebalance that with adding new cities into the North American market. So I think you will see us develop network network opportunities both to the east and to the west over the next decade.
Are you going to prioritize your expansion in India, given the fact that it's become a fairly competitive market? I mean, forget the foreign airlines that are servicing India, but now domestic carriers. Air India has grown, and with the merger of Air India and Vistara, you have a much larger fleet at hand. You've now got Indigo looking at flying international once the wide bodies come in. Of course, they're already doing many routes at this point in time. How do you look at the competitive landscape in India?
I think it doesn't surprise me. It's very exciting what's happening in Indian aviation, and I think you will have, very strong global carriers emerge over the next couple of years. And everything I hear is that those plans are taking shape. And if you look at the order books, I think there might be 1,000 aircraft on order for Indian carriers. So, I think we're going to see global players emerge out of the market. For us, India is one of the few markets where we're bigger today than we were pre-pandemic, and we were very quick to expand beyond where we were. So I'd always like to, be part of the growth story, and we're very ambitious, and I think, our track record of 100 years of serving the market speaks for itself.
So given the fact that you see this as an exciting market, as well as the competitive intensity of this market, of those 35 new aircraft that are coming in to your fleet over the next few years, how much of that deployment will be prioritized for a market like India?
Well, I think you will see a significant proportion. I won't give the exact number now, but trust me, when we look at the fleet order, India is very much one of the markets that shapes what aircraft we buy and how many.
Sean, I want to ask you this, as a CEO today, if you're used to dealing with airspace restrictions and, oil price volatility and IT outages and so on and so forth, what's the thing that you believe you find yourself most vulnerable at today?
Look, I think if aviation is let plough its own, path its own way, and let compete globally and has access to markets, I think we'll be fine, and we've proven that. It's a very competitive industry, but it's an industry which keeps on improving. And I think ultimately, what gets in the way sometimes is obviously the economic cycle, but more often than not, it can be government policy. So I think the more we liberalise access to international markets, the better for consumers and the better for airlines.
Is it getting tighter as opposed to being more open today?
I think it has been. We have a number of open markets in Europe and the US, and I think that's led to massive expansion and expansion of consumer choice. I think India as well has been opening up its air services agreement, but there are many parts of the world where I think we could do with improving access to markets.
I want to ask you something that Indian aviation companies today and the regulator and the government is dealing with. In the last 4 days, we've had a situation of 20+ hoax threats, bomb threats, which have not turned out to be, fortunately, true. But you've had them disrupt airline schedules. You've had them disrupt customer, travel plans, and it's a huge economic cost to an airline as well. Now, how do you deal with this at BA? I mean, how often is this an issue for you?
I think we've well-established protocols, not just at BA, but internationally with airports to deal with these kind of threats. And there is a kind of an assessment you do to understand whether it's a threat that, leads to the grounding of an aircraft or whether it's not something that's credible. I can't really comment on Air India's situation other than I think, airlines have to take the appropriate action that they feel is the right thing to do, and I would support whatever decision they take.
But is the threat assessment done at the airline level, or is it done in conjunction with the regulator as well as the
airport and the airline
agencies?
and the security agencies will be, very much involved. And we use all of the assets that are at our disposal to make the assessments.
And is there an escalation that you've seen in this sort of a threat?
I haven't seen something on this scale in quite a while, but I couldn't really comment on the specific issues here because I'm not close to it. But other than we've well-established protocols that we enact to make sure that, we stay safe.
No, safety, of course, is paramount, and that has always to be kept top of mind. But, Sean, let me ask you this. You set out a vision for a better BA, and you've, of course, specified the areas that you want to move on, punctuality being one of them, customer experience and improving that being the other. And you gave us an indication of what the transformation plan looks like. But on the better BA vision,
yes,
where do you find yourself today?
I think we're making great progress, and there's still a lot of work to do. And we're implementing a very, very exciting transformation and modernising so many parts of the airline. And this year was a hell of a lot better than last year and the year before, and next year will be better again. So, the investment is getting traction, and I'm very happy with the momentum we're creating.
And final question, really, on profitability, because I think that is something that many airlines, and India's no exception, have struggled with, and there are a few that have delivered consistently on profits. But what's the ingredient? What's the magic sauce there? Because you've had your own transformation and turnaround story on that.
You've always got to offer value for money. And never forget that it's about the customer in terms of both experience and the airfares you put out there. And you've got to run a competitive business to do that, but also invest in the things that make a difference for a customer. I don't think it's more complicated than that. And, as long as we keep doing that, I think we'll have a sustainable business. And
do you believe that you've probably got to the best in terms of profitability, or is there more to come now given the expansion plans?
Well, look, I think the modernisation and the transformation should lead to more value. I think a better experience for customers, but also a better, return for the people who give us the money to invest in the airline. And I think we can balance, the needs of our shareholders and the needs of our customers and our colleagues very effectively in the way we're running the business now.
So let me end by asking you, Sean, as CEO today, what's the number one priority and what's the number one risk that keeps you up at night?
Our number one priority really is to execute our transformation well and to improve the experience for customers. That's number one at the minute. I think there's a lot of things that, you have to think about when you're running an airline, but not much keeps me awake at night.
No?
I just love what I do. I have great people around me, and it's a fascinating business.
And how often are we going to see you back in India?
This is my second time now in the last 15 months, so I love coming here.
Well, we hope to see much more of you, Sean. Congratulations once again.
Thank you very much.
On a century here in India, and we wish you the very best of luck as you move forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Well, with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of the Global Dialogue. From all of us here on the team for now, goodbye, and many thanks for watching.